Hi, everyone. My name is Jai, and I'm founder and CEO of the Latinista. Thank you so much for being here with us. Today's webinar is called Reinvent Your Brand. We've got a really special speaker today, but before we get started, I want to tell you a little bit about what the Latinista does and who we are. We're a national network for Latinas and women of color that want to hone in on some special skills. So whether that's learning how to pitch yourself for a new job, learning how to create your professional brand on LinkedIn, or how to articulate who you are and what some of your transferable skills could be, we have webinars and workshops for all of that. We have chapters in New York City, Chicago, Miami, Los Angeles, and we also have a great new community in San Diego. If you haven't yet answered our national survey, we're going to be sending you that link after today's webinar so that you can help us get a little bit closer to where we are in programming. And we cover the things and topics that you want to learn the most. And so today, I'm really happy to be here introducing you to a good friend of mine. She is a storyteller, a brand strategist, and she is absolutely the best when it comes to thinking of ways in which you can reinvent yourself and your brand and how you can sell yourself. Something that she's taught me a long time ago is taking that purpose and that passion and making it profitable. So she's going to teach you all about what your brand has been before, what it could look like in the future, and how to monetize that. And so Vicky, thank you so much for being here today, and the floor is yours.
Thank you for having me. Okay, so let's dig into this conversation. And I really want to kind of frame it around that sense of like, this is a conversation about how you can, I want to be very intentional about the words I use. So when we think about reinventing your brand, reinvention itself could be something that implies a pivot. It could be something that implies starting something brand new, ending an existing brand, and transitioning into a new one. So, and especially it's interesting to have this kind of conversation now with what's going on with the pandemic, with the quarantine, because this is really I would say the perfect time for you to start going within and trying to reimagine what is your vision, not just for like your brand and your business and your life, but like who do you want to be and how do you want to show up? Because when I use the word brand strategy, I look at it from the sense of it's much more than just a pretty website and nice graphics for social media. It's more, and what I take is more of a holistic approach to brand strategy so that it becomes this, almost it becomes a part of who you are. And it's an expression of who you are and who you want to be and how you want to show up in the world. And so looking at it from that perspective of how do you align your passion and your purpose and your personality so that it can align with profitability. And this conversation can apply to entrepreneurs, if you have a side hustle that you want to make a full-time hustle, but even if you're climbing the corporate ladder, there's a term that's often called an intrapreneur, where you have that entrepreneurial mindset as you are working in corporate America or social services. So as you kind of sit in on this conversation and start brainstorming for yourself and reflecting, think of your brand as that imprint you want to leave in the world. And so I am going to just start off with a quote that I always have: who you are is your competitive edge. You know, there's a quote by Howard Thurman that I absolutely love. Don't ask what the world needs, ask what lights you up, because what the world needs is more people who have been lit up. And so, especially when we're talking about things like a brand versus business, what I've come to see is that people tend to gravitate towards defining their brand based on what other people need. And the approach that I take with individuals around how to cultivate a brand is to align with what is it that you're passionate about? What is it that you love to do? Because when you are in kind of like that zone of genius, then you are going to attract the people who need that. and then you're going to attract the opportunities where that form of, let's say, your magic is going to thrive in. So think about that. Who are you? And throughout this entire conversation on brand reinvention, I'm going to keep coming back to those questions of where you get to define what that answer is. So, for a long time, I would identify as a designer, but it wasn't that I was a designer. It's just that I happened to be helping others tell their story through the visual medium. So, looking at who is it that you want to reinvent. And even if it's not that you want to reinvent yourself, think of it from that sense of you want to reimagine how you're going to show up in the world. So a quick kind of background notes on me. I've been doing this for, I'm going to say the time I wrote this was like over 15 years. I started marketing. The first marketing project I worked on, I would say, was being a student leader in college. So we're talking about 97. As a profession or in a professional capacity, I would say 2000. So this would mark the 20th year. Good to know. So I've been in some capacity where it's either online marketing, traditional marketing, web design, graphic design, strategy, program development, vocational development, vocational training. I was a counselor. And so that's only in the social services and marketing side. Then there was the entertainment side where I did a lot of talent management, production, logistics. And so being able to kind of look at my background and how I've had to reinvent the work that I was going to do and how I was showing up, I would say for the past 15 years, it's been a gradual evolution. And also when you're thinking of like your brand, don't approach it as, okay, I need to be someone else, or I need to do something else. When you look at it from the sense of I am evolving into this next iteration of my career, or I am writing a new chapter in my book, because what that does is it allows you to bring a lot of those transferable skills from the work you've done in the past, because I believe that a lot of that helps prepare you for, the vision that you have now and the direction you want to take your brand for the future. And so I've worked in social services, I've worked in nonprofit, I've worked at advertising agencies, digital marketing agencies, I've worked with major media and entertainment brands, I've worked with entrepreneurs, I've worked with performing artists. And one thing I did notice is, even though you have all of these different industries with these different kind of demands and these different kind of access to resources, at the end of the day, and even now when you see with marketing has evolved into this storytelling perspective. And so being able to build relationships, and more than anything, is create that emotional connection with the people that you want to engage. And so think of it from that sense of when you are looking at your brand, who do you want to connect with? And how do you want to engage them? So let's see. So my approach to brand strategy is what I framed it as a holistic brand strategy approach. And what I've learned with that is that it allows me to tackle 3 different sections that can help create a cohesive vision and roadmap for how you're going to express yourself, as well as how you are going to captivate an audience. And so a holistic brand strategy approach that helps align your passion, purpose, and personality with profitability is section 1 is empowered self-mastery. And so with empowered self-mastery, this is where you look at things like the Enneagram, the Myers-Briggs, anything that allows you to really dig deep and to understand your whys, your anchor, your passion points. And not so much just your passion points, even going deeper than that and saying, okay, if you're passionate about X, why are you passionate about X? And getting down to kind of like, what is that core? Then we go into strategic storytelling. And from that perspective, this is where you look at how do you take your stories or your teachable moments and create opportunities to connect and engage an audience. And so, one of the questions I often get from people is, how much do I share on social media? Is this too much information? And my approach with that is always share aspects of yourself, or if you want to share something that's personal, but make sure that there's a lesson attached to it. Make sure that there's a takeaway from that. And that's really the core behind something like strategic storytelling, so that you're using your teachable moments, those lessons, your expertise, in a way that allows those that you're looking to engage to get some kind of, lesson out of it, to get some kind of takeaway from it. And then create your secret sauce, which is really the essence of when you want to pivot and monetize your brand. And so when you think of secret sauce, I always think of, okay, well, there's a gazillion people doing coaching or being a publicist or being a writer. So why would I want to do the same thing? Or why should I go into an industry that's already overcrowded? And that idea behind secret sauce is, yes, you can go in and do something that other people are doing, but you have a secret sauce. There's a special way that only you can do something. And that is what's going to attract the people who want it the way you make it. Does anyone have any, I also want to get a sense if there's any questions anyone has or anything specific that you would like to discuss and address. Feel free to, drop it in the chat so that I can be sure to integrate some of those questions into this conversation about brand reinvention. So going into empowered self-mastery. This is really where you want to have that heart-to-heart and discuss with yourself of, who are you? Or rather, if you're not crystal clear on that, or if let's say you are clear on that, then I would evolve that question and ask yourself, who do you want to be? And this is what's kind of unique and special about getting into cultivating your personal brand, because you get to define it however you want to define it. And so one of the first questions you want to ask when you're doing that is, what do you value? What is important to you? How do you define worth? What are your standards? But whenever you're asking yourself a lot of these reflection questions, you want to keep digging and ask why. If travel is important to you, why is travel important to you? Because it allows you to explore, it allows you to experience another culture. Okay, well, why is that important to you? And so as you dig deeper, that why is what, and we'll go over what an anchor is, but it's going to help connect you to your anchor, because that's going to be what keeps you tethered to who you are, how you want to show up. And then it helps you understand what kind of content you want to share on social media, but also what kind of clients do you want to work with? What kind of corporations do you want to work with? What brands do you want to align with? What opportunities do you want to participate in? And so what I like to do is I created what I call the sacred brand archetypes, which helps break down and understand personality types. And there's a ton of different, let's say, personality profiles and personality tests out there. Some of the more popular ones are the Myers-Briggs. Enneagrams are really popular right now. And you see a lot of those quizzes on Facebook, whereas, what city are you? But the idea behind these personality tests is to get a sense for what are the traits that you have, like what are the commonalities around what you may be passionate about and where you're going to shine. And so when I created the sacred brand archetypes, it was to align with 4 different core types. And they are, the creators. So when you think of the creators for the most part, they want to bring something to life. They are the writers, they are the designers, they are the ones who are stylists. Like, they're the ones that take an idea and give it form. Then we have the free spirits. So the free spirits are exactly how you would think they are. They are very go with the flow. And so someone who may be like a digital nomad would be a free spirit. Someone who likes to be a remote worker, or someone who likes to travel and work from, that idea of like the laptop lifestyle, that would be a free spirit. Then we have the go-getters. And when I think of go-getters, that to me is like the textbook. If you ever saw The Devil Wears Prada and you had Miranda Priestley, that's the go-getter. That is the one who is all about the hustle. And so, you know, they may have multiple hustles at once while they're trying to, you know, go after whatever it is that they're striving for. And so, but it's more, when I think of these personality archetypes, it's more of that energy. So a go-getter energy is going to be someone who is very much a type A personality. And then we have the nurturers. And so nurturers, these are the people who are all about servicing others. So when you think of coaches, when you think of subject matter experts who may be thought leaders or brand cheerleaders, you know, nurturers are the ones that help cultivate others and bring out the best in others. And that's why I always like to use the reference of a coach, because I think that's the easiest way to think of who is a nurturer. But when you look at a lot of these personality energies, it's not necessarily saying, okay, well, I'm a coach, but I'm a go-getter coach. This is kind of what the beauty is of understanding who you are, so that you can best position yourself when you're expressing yourself on social, but also when you're positioning yourself for opportunities. So I was talking about anchor, and this is really the root of understanding not just how to reinvent your brand, but how to develop your brand and how to cultivate a brand that you can use for whatever opportunities you're looking to do. So whether that's get a new client, whether that is gain visibility, whether that's get a new job, or whether it's a lateral position, or if you want to just, you know, keep going within your firm and just climb the corporate ladder, but really understanding what is your anchor. And when we think of the anchor, we go back to what is your why. So your anchor will always keep you rooted and tethered to your why. So your passion and your purpose are part of your anchor. You know, this is, if you're an entrepreneur, your why is what's going to keep you going when you want to quit. If you are looking to find another position, your anchor is what's going to keep you from taking a job that's either going to set you back or not aligned with who you want to be. And so this is, your anchor is what's going to give you that fire to keep going. And I like to use the image of an anchor because when we think of it like that, there's 3 questions. What do you love to do? Why do you love to do it? And how does it make you feel? So I plugged in my answers so that you can get a sense for how to use this. So for me, I love to create. And even though I created this particular slide 3 years ago, my answers have not deviated or changed in any way. So I always love to create. I love to create because it allows me to express my creative imagination. And when I express my creative imagination, I feel a huge sense of freedom. So when you think of your anchor, you identify those keywords in your answer to better understand your anchor and your why. So for me, my 3 words were create, expression, and freedom. And why is this important? Because this helps give me a framework of how I'm going to build my website, what language to use on my website, how do I want to show up on social, what offerings do I want to deliver within my business, what clients do I want to align with? And then if I'm exploring opportunities, whether that's employment opportunities or brand opportunities, those are the questions I ask. Is this opportunity aligned with my anchor? Is this going to allow me to create? Is this going to allow me to be expressive? And is this going to help me feel free? Because everything about my brand and everything about your brand is going to be rooted in your anchor. You know, for me, it's all about creative expression. So as we move into strategic storytelling, and I've just recently kind of shifted this into strategic storytelling. And I used to call it a brand voice clinic, but it's so much more than that, because it's not just about finding your voice, it's about identifying a voice that is going to align with your end game. And when I say it like that is, how are you sharing your story so that it helps match your ambitions and helps you reach your goals? So the first thing I always do is look at, if you're building your brand, do you have a brand dictionary? And a brand dictionary is where you identify words, and it's exactly how it sounds. You create this document that has keywords, catchphrases, anything that helps you sound like you. Because in your brand dictionary, what this is going to do is going to help across 3 ways. It's going to help with positioning, because you're going to want to use words that represent your brand's value. It's going to help with expression. You want to use words that reflect your brand's personality. And then more importantly, you want to look at engagement. What are the words that are going to captivate your audience's attention? Because words matter. Do you create or do you devise? Do you discover? Do you plan? Do you organize? As you can see, the word create can have so many other synonyms. And depending on the word that you choose to use, it can convey a different, emotional response from your audience. So this is really where that brand dictionary comes into play for anything. I mean, if you're thinking of applying for a new position, your brand dictionary is going to help you create the resume that's going to help you stand out while also reflecting who you are. Do you lead or do you accompany? Do you manage? Do you oversee? Do you organize? Are you a consultant or are you a strategist? Are you a coach? Are you an advisor? Are you an expert? A lot of these words can still resonate and sound similar in terms of the duties and responsibilities, but this is really where your brand dictionary is going to help you create a language that when someone's reading your website or when someone's engaging with you, over time, they'll be able to identify, okay, this sounds like so-and-so, because this sounds exactly how they would speak, or this sounds exactly like their brand. If let's say you are a coach and you're one of 50 coaches, how will someone be able to distinguish you from all of the others? And design can only do so much. Your language and the copy you use is really what is going to resonate with the right person, because what words do is it helps create that emotional connection. I started this as an activity to create I created a Sacred Journey Oracle deck. And prior to that, I was thinking I wanted to do a deck that was 365 cards, 1 card for every day of the year, but I need 365 words. Okay, cool. So I opened up Evernote and I just started writing words that I felt like resonated with me. And so from there, I don't even think I reached 365 by the time I started doing my deck. But what happened was when I decided, okay, I'm going to do a 50 card deck instead and kind of really evolve that project more, I was able to go into my brand dictionary and say, okay, I need 50 words. Let me go through this list and find 50 words that make sense for a deck. So this is where having a brand dictionary can help provide opportunities for new offerings. This is where I come up with names for new programs, new products, new courses, catchy captions, clever writing for newsletters or emails or sales copy. So this brand dictionary really becomes kind of like the foundation for how you're going to communicate your brand with your audience. And so something that I like to call the unicorn status is where you take your anchor, you combine it with your brand dictionary, and this creates your voice. And so when you're reinventing your brand or building your brand, what you want to do is you want to find where's those white spaces so that you can stand out even more. So what is a white space? A white space, it's used a lot in design, where you think of it in the sense of like you go to a website and when you see a lot of pictures and a lot of copy, it gets very busy because there's no white space. White space is exactly how it it sounds. It's just white, it's empty space. And so when you see, especially when you're looking at a site that may have like a minimalistic theme to it or design where there's not a lot of graphics or visuals, and then maybe there's just like bold copy, that bold copy stands out even more because it's bold copy within white space. So you want to identify how can you cultivate your brand in white space so that you stand out. And then more importantly, when you are storytelling, you got to understand who are your peeps. You know, who are you speaking to? Who are you looking to engage? You know, if you are looking to get a new job, then maybe your peeps are hiring managers, HR people, recruiters. If you are an entrepreneur, your peeps could be customers, potential clients. So you really have to hone in on who is it that you are having that conversation with. Because when you're creating your content strategy and when you're looking to show up online with your brand, then your content is going to fall under one of, you know, it could be all four, or it could be one of these four. Content for the most part on social is either inspirational, it's educational, it's promotional, or it's informational. So when you are reinventing your brand, and this is really key when you are looking to do that pivot, because part of doing a pivot is you not only have to realign your brand, but now you have to get an audience used to this new version of who you want to be. And this is where a content strategy can help with that process. So when you have clarity around how you want to reinvent who you are and how you're showing up, you use things like your website, you use things like social media to create content that aligns with this new vision of your brand so that people can make that connection. So in my example, I was a web designer for about 10, probably more like 15 years. And so my challenge doing a reinvention or pivot was, how do I get people used to seeing me as a strategist and as a writer versus a designer? And so being able to understand that, you know, there's a process to that. Those things take time, but it was all about, how am I showing up? Am I still showing up and using language of I'm a designer in my bio? I still take on design work. So like when you are ready to make that reinvention, you need to ask yourself, how committed are you to making that shift? Because it's not just about you preparing the materials that's going to align with this new vision. It's all about making sure people see you as this new version. And so when you're creating content around this new brand that you have, what are you doing? What are you inspiring? What are you teaching? What are you selling? Or are you providing information? And then you want to ask yourself, is this the way to express this message? And we take it back to, who am I speaking to? Who are your peeps? And then when you are on social, I'm all about CTAs. You're sharing content on social. What is that call to action? Even if you're not selling something, you still want them to take an action. That action could be like my post, share this article, retweet this comment. So, you know, it's getting people to engage. You know, you can have an audience, but if the audience is not engaged, then it's going to be very difficult to gauge how receptive and captive they are to your brand. And then one of the things that I like to also do is create an editorial calendar, because a lot of these things also help you create structure around how you want to share your expertise. You know, if you're looking at reinventing your brand, especially during what we're experiencing right now, this is a really good opportunity to do that, because there's so many ways you can start connecting with an audience who may, during other times, not have had the time or energy or ability to connect and engage with you. And so while we're still kind of in this kind of quarantine scenario, everyone's online. Everyone's online, everyone's at home for the most part. So how are you using this as a way to build those online relationships? And then we go into one of my favorite topics, which is creating your secret sauce. And creating your secret sauce is where we monetize. So what I like to call a bankable brand, because a bank is how you monetize. And when I think of bank, where this term came from is if you look at Hollywood or entertainment, you think of that concept of like, who are the bankable actors? Bankable actors are those A-list, where they get $20 million per film because whenever they're in a movie, whether it's bad or not, doesn't matter, because they have a huge following domestically and internationally, where they'll bring in an audience that'll help them make that $20 million back 10 times over. So that bankable actors are the Tom Cruises, the Leonardo DiCaprios, the Will Smiths of the world, because they bring in the bank. And so using that concept with your brand, how do you create a bankable brand? And so thinking of it from that sense of bank is how you monetize. Able is having the power, and the brand is how you show up. So a bankable brand is having the power to monetize how you are showing up. And there's 3 sections when you think of creating a bankable brand is, you want to make sure that you are aligned. You want to make sure that you have that cohesive voice and that you're cultivating relationships. So when you aligned, we take it back to your passion, your purpose, and your profitability. How do you light up? And how are you positioning yourself? A lot of these things go back to the idea of like that brand dictionary and taking that and saying, okay, here are my passion points. Here's my anchor. Here's what I'm drawn to do. Now, this is how I'm going to creatively position myself. With your voice, here's also where your voice comes into play when you're building your brand. Because when you are on brand, then it's going to stand out more when you are not on brand. And so creating that strong, cohesive voice is going to help give you authority when you do speak. And then cultivating relationships. You're cultivating relationships in, let's say, 4 places. You're engaging your community on social media. I like to call your website your digital home, because you own your website. Unless you own Facebook and Instagram, you don't own social media. You don't own your social media profiles. So your website is that one place where you could really like plant roots and say, this is my digital home. I can put whatever I want on my website. I can decorate it the way I want to decorate it. I can use this to raise awareness. I can use this to build my list. I could use this to convert sales. Then you want to look at email marketing. This is where you start creating conversations with your audience. I do a newsletter and I call it inbox conversations, because those newsletters are about us. Let's have a talk. Let's have a heart to heart, because even it's still email, but someone's inbox is still an intimate place. People don't give their email addresses out to just anyone. They've already said, okay, I'm going to make an investment, and I'm going to trust that you're going to give me content that's going to resonate with me. So email marketing helps you build trust. And then there's your reputation. This is where content creation comes in to help you build that reputation. Content, whether it's a podcast, whether it's a YouTube channel, even if it's just, let's say a social media series or a video series on IGTV, something that helps you educate, and more importantly, it positions you as an authority, which is going to be key for those who are looking to reinvent their brands, because you're going to have to go a little bit above and beyond when it comes to content creation, because it's not just about you creating content for the sake of creating content. Now you need to get people used to seeing you as an authority in a different space. So we talk about brand reinvention, but the word that we're really talking about is pivot. So whether you want to call it a pivot, whether you want to say I'm making a transition, whether you want to say I'm upgrading my brand. The word I like to use a lot is plot twist, because it's kind of like, okay, plot twist, we're going in a different direction. Whatever that term is, or whatever resonates with you, the first thing you want to do is identify what is your status quo. And you want to think of it as, this is point A. Point A serves as your baseline, because everything you do from this point is going to start from point A. So when you're making that pivot, when you're reinventing your brand, you want to know where you are at right now, so that you can see what are the changes you could make right now. And then what you want to do is identify, where do you want to be? We'll call this point B. And this kind of serves as kind of like your North Star. So if, let's say, one of the pivots that I'm actually making, which is, let's say, it's a reinvention. I wouldn't necessarily call it a pivot, because I'm not leaving what I'm doing, but one of the evolutions of my brand is, I've been a brand strategist for well over 15 years, and now I'm making a transition into getting certified as a doula. And so on surface, that looks like night and day. How do you go from design to production to helping people figure out what their websites and brands are going to look like, to now helping women deliver babies? And so the way I've kind of framed my reinvention is, the work that I like to do is, I like to help women birth something into the world, whether that's a brand, whether that's a business, and now whether that's a baby. And so that's how I create synergy with my existing brand, as well as the reinvented, or the evolution of the brand that I'm looking to develop. So understanding, where do you want to go? Like, I know where I want to go. And so once you identify what point B is, and I would say that anyone who's struggling with a pivot or transition, those struggles and challenges are often because point B is not clearly defined. When you know where you want to go, like if you wanted to take a road trip and say, I am driving from Manhattan to Santa Monica, California. When you're that clear, you know exactly, you may take different routes, but you know where your end destination is. If you just say, well, I'm in New York City, I want to take a road trip, I want to go to Cali, that's not very clear. You'll end up in Cali, but you may end up in San Diego, or you may end up in San Francisco, which are two completely different places in that state. And so having clarity around where you want to go is going to help make that reinvention and pivot much more manageable and clear. Because once you know where you want to go, then it's just a matter of reverse engineering your path so that you can get from point A to point B. Are there any questions?
We sure do. I'm going to pull up the questions right now. The first one that we have says, did you ever doubt yourself before starting to share your expertise? I'm always thinking of, oh, maybe I should write this fun blog post. I get excited, I start writing it and never publish it because I get in my own head. How did you overcome that?
Publish. Click publish. I mean, there's confidence comes with practice. And I would say, I know the term imposter syndrome is used a lot in our space, but I noticed that it tends to be mostly women who use that term or who struggle with that. And so what I would say is, look at others in your industry and see if, trying to find the most PC way of saying this. There are people who have so much less expertise than you do, doing 10 times more and getting more opportunities than you are. And I think when you look at it from that perspective, at least for me, that's what helped me kind of break away from imposter syndrome, because I was around people who, they just didn't know what they were doing, but they were leading in those industries, or they were leading in those organizations. And so for me, when I realized the confidence was more about, it was a head game. So how do I get out of my head? And the only way you can get out of your head is, it's funny, I have a client who is a nutrition expert and a health expert, and she's always saying, you need to get out of your head and get into your body. And
Mm.
so movement in that sense, I would say when you're struggling with that confidence, what can you physically do? You could physically click publish. You could physically post something on social. You could physically do something, whether that's create a product, whether that's, you have to figure out ways to intellectually get out of your head and get more into creation mode or doing mode, because that's going to help you start practicing. Like there's something a friend of mine is always saying, done is better than perfect, because you spend all this time making something perfect and it's never really going to be perfect, but something can be done. And then once something's done, you could always tweak it. It's easier to tweak something that's already created than to keep redoing it in your mind 1,000 times, because you have to give it a chance to be in the world and be in the space. Because what your version of 10, not even, let's say if you have issues with perfectionism, what you consider a 5 could be someone else's 10.
Mm-hmm.
And you're not going to know that until you start putting things out. That's the other thing is, I'm big on, as much as I love creativity, I'm also very, very left brain. So I love data, I love information, I love insight. You're not going to get that insight you need until you start putting things out.
I love that. That's great advice. We've got a couple more questions. The next one is there any particular website creation platform that you recommend?
I'm going to try to be nice. I'll say what I would stay away from. I would stay away from Wix. I would stay away from Weebly. I would either try to find a platform that uses WordPress, because WordPress, in my opinion, is one of the best platforms out there for building a website. And there's a platform called Show It, which helps you get pretty themes, but also uses WordPress and uses the hosting that I use to help you manage those websites. So I would look at, something like Show It, I think .co. Hello Designs is another place that does website themes, but also will help you host it. And I would say second option would be Squarespace, but I would only go through Squarespace if you've exhausted all the WordPress platforms, and if you really can't get a grasp of WordPress, because I think WordPress is the best platform out there for building any kind of website, whether it's an e-commerce site, or if you're going to shift into an e-commerce site, or start creating more blogs. Like I'm a huge WordPress advocate.
Mm-hmm. And the next question is, how do we clearly define point B when you want to pivot? It's hard for me as I want to do so much. I want to start a blog, have my own product, create video content, etc.
So here's what I do when it comes to having like a really big vision. You could always break it up into phases. So it's not your point B is not a blog. Your point B is a destination. Like, where do you want the blog to take you? What do you want those products to, it's almost kind of like, who do you want to be in a year? Do you want to be traveling and working from like Italy? Do you want to have a storefront? Like, because things like a blog and like all of those things are tangible commodities. Point B is not point B is a destination. It's how do you want to show up? How do you want to live? How do you want to go about your day to day? And then things like a blog and an online store and products and all those other things are just avenues that are going to help you get there. Because a lot of times also what I find is people think that they want to do all of these things until they actually start doing it and then realize, I don't want to do this. But there was something about that drew them to it. So it's about identifying, and this is why that anchor is really important, because when you're clear on your anchor, point B gets a lot easier to define. And then we look at saying, okay, how do we break this up into phases? So, and that's the whole thing with reverse engineering and why I like to break things up into quarters. So if the big picture vision is to build an online store with products, then, okay, how do I break that down into 4 phases? If the big picture vision is to quit my full-time job and run my business full-time, Then I have to break that up into phases. How do I get there? So that point B, I would say focus on point B as being a destination point, almost kind of like a mile marker. When you're traveling or when you're on the highway, those mile markers let you know where you are in that state. So look at it from that perspective. Point B is not end result, it's where you want to be.
Mm-hmm. And along with the other question about the website, Alexis is asking, do you think it's important to have that website domain as something you own, even if you aren't ready to sell something right now?
Absolutely, because here's the thing. You're always selling, even if you don't sell. You're selling yourself. So at the very minimum, a landing page that helps you collect people's email addresses until you're ready to launch. Because you don't want to have to wait until you have something to sell to then say, hey, I'm looking to sell something, everybody get on my list. And this is why it's like relationship building. You want to start building those relationships now before you need them for something.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, it'll also give you a sense for, because what if, let's say, in 3 months you decide to change? So having that landing page to and I would always advocate to your personal name. I think everybody should have a URL with their name at the very minimum so that someone else doesn't take it. So that you could use that to build those relationships with you. And then if you launch a product or if you launch something that has a different brand name, then, it could have its own URL. But if you need to have some place, because it's almost kind of like, if I'm going to use the analogy of home, if you don't have your own website, you're homeless online. You're crowd surfing on social media, but you don't have your own place.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And one of our last questions, I believe this may be the last one, says, do you think we discover our takeaways in the anchor phase? Is it misleading to communicate personal takeaways that fit across multiple industries instead of honing in on one industry when you're pivoting?
I'm not quite sure I followed that question. Can you elaborate a little more?
Yeah, share with us a little bit more what you're thinking with this question, Alexis. It reads, do you
Yeah.
think we discover our takeaways in the
I'm
anchor
trying to understand, is it misleading to say that you're still learning something before you start teaching it? Is that more aligned with the question that you're asking? Because I will say this, wherever you are in your phase, wherever you are in your discovery process, you got to remember if you're using, like, my teachable moments were helpful for me several years ago. So regardless of wherever you are in your career, in your entrepreneurial journey, you have insight that someone else doesn't have. So it's never misleading in that sense if you're teaching something that you just learned, because someone else is going through that exact same process that you're going through, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if that kind of answers the question that you have.
Yeah.
It would help if there was like an example to that, so I could see specifically what you're looking to do. Because here's the thing: is like, even if you are honing in on one industry, okay, I think I might have an idea of what that question is. Is it misleading to communicate personal takeaways that fit across multiple industries? Your personal story is never misleading. So when you are sharing your story, that's what it is. It's your story. And when you express it as such and frame it as such, then it's not misleading in any way. But I think it's also looking at, one of the things that, we didn't talk about here is, and this might be helpful with when you're looking at how you want to develop your brand, is we are always a work in progress. And I think this might factor into some of that imposter syndrome where we feel like we need to be an expert at something before we can speak on it. But there's something that you can already speak on. And you eventually will learn more, but where you're at right now is good enough. to share
Mhm.
and participate in conversations with. And I'm also a big believer in that just because you may not be an expert in a specific industry, if you have the skill set in another space, that still makes you an expert in that specific skill set. And I think it's a matter of making sure this is where language is really key so that you are expressing it that way. So like, let's say someone this is actually a pretty good example to use. Let's say they're a stay-at-home mom and they were a stay-at-home mom for 20 years. There's a show, and I don't know if anybody here is familiar with it, called Younger, which is, it's a hysterical show, but it's that concept of like, she was a stay-at-home wife taking care of her daughter for like 20 years. And she was in the publishing industry. And at 40, she had a hard time transitioning back into the publishing industry. So she lied about her age. She used her experience and expertise, but she said that she was 26 instead of 40 because she realized she wasn't getting any interviews as a 40-year-old. So I use that as an example because she has 20 years of experiencing managing a household. That's organizational skills. That's productivity skills.
Mm-hmm.
Taking care of a child. That's, childcare, like all of it. If you are homeschooling, that's education, that's training, that's teaching. Like it's looking at the skill sets you may have that may not necessarily be in your industry, but still using that as leverage to position yourself as whether it's an authority or it's an expert in that work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Alexis actually added, she says, "Thank you. Yes, I'm wondering how to take teachable moments and my story from one industry to the next without confusing the new people I'm trying to communicate on how I fit." Mm-hmm. So
Okay.
taking those transitioning
And
skills.
I'm going to ask you one more question if you can give me an example, because it's kind of hard to answer that without like one example of how you can leverage a teachable moment. Because I look at teachable moments as, let me try to see if I can give an example from my background. Yeah, I'm not coming up with it. I'm completely drawing a blank on it. But when you think of teachable moments, there's a lesson. Okay, so I'll use this phrase that I use a lot as well. Breakthroughs are often disguised as breakdowns. And so when you look at your teachable moment, you have to find what is the lesson that you can use and leverage. And it's difficult to answer that without like a clear answer or an example of how to take that and transform it into something that you could leverage in a different industry, because it might entail being, it depends. Because I also don't want to say, you don't want to be too vulnerable because it may not be relevant to the industry. It really depends on what that teachable moment is, so that you can articulate it in a way that's going to help you with your brand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it looks like she's trying to transition industries and taking those transferable skills with her and maybe taking a teachable moment from when she got potentially laid off.
Mm-hmm. I'll
Well,
think of it when I remember interviewing again after having like a 1 year, it was more than a 1 year, it was like a 3-year break freelancing. And the way I described it was, even as a freelancer, I was still doing X. And so what was, good about a lot of the freelancing gigs that I had was that I could still list the employer, but it wasn't full-time employee. So I would put temporary project on my resume or temporary assignment, so that it didn't look like I was freelancing from one place to another. So I think it's, the best thing I can think of is it's all about how you spin it at the end of the day. But it's, if you can give an example, I can give you a more clear way of doing it, because it's going to be tough to really break down how to leverage a teachable moment if you don't know what that teachable moment is. Because it might be, maybe it's not a teachable moment, maybe it's just, transferable skills. I used to work with homeless, formerly incarcerated, substance abuse population in the city as a vocational counselor. And that was, our big thing. How do we take their work history, which was scattered and diverse, and explain the 5 years in prison on a job application where it wasn't going to be a hindrance? So, a lot of cleverly crafted resume writing skills, but the idea was, let's look at what your skills are. How do we transfer those skills over into another industry? And that applies across the board, even with your brand. You the things you're born good at doing, they're there for a reason. You're naturally gifted in certain things. Whatever skills you've acquired in your professional history, you've acquired them for a reason. And so what you want to do is you want to take all of that and leverage that for the next opportunity.
I love that. And tell us a little bit more about where we can find you, some of the programs that you're about to run right now, and how we can benefit from them.
Okay, sure. So right now I have a program that I'm launching in June called Bankable Magic. And so the idea behind that is it's 6 modules where we cover those 6 areas, where it's, empowered self-mastery, it's strategic storytelling, it's editorial magic, what I call. So it's, figuring out how to create that content strategy. It's inbox engagement. So it's not just about building your email list, but it's like, how do you engage your people? And then there's creating your secret sauce, which is one of my personal favorites because I like making new things. And that's like, how do we create your new program? How do we create your new course? How do we create your new offering? And then visual storytelling, which is all about design. How do you use design to help amplify whatever your message is in a visual format?
I love that. If you can drop that link into our chat, we can give everyone access, and everyone's going to receive the replay of this video that you saw today with Vicky's teachings. And you'll also get that in an email from myself and from Vicky. There it is, bankablemagic.com. I love that. Yeah, it seems like you're all in this evolution process, and Vicky is definitely the one that can help you in that journey, because I certainly have been working with Vicky for a number of years now, but every time that she teaches, I learn something new. So I love it. It's incredible how refreshing it is to know that there's opportunities out there and there's ways to reframe how you're thinking about positioning yourself in the future.
Also, can I add something? Like, when I became an entrepreneur, when I took my first leap of faith into entrepreneurship, it was not fully intentional. And I'll say that because it was the recession of 2003. And this is why recessions always have a special place in my heart, because the recession of 2003 was when I first took a leap of faith. I've come across some entrepreneurs who've become really good friends of mine that I met during the recession of 2008. And so we're now about to experience the recession of 2020. And so entrepreneurship is either intentional or accidental. And so whether it's intentional or accidental, using that as an opportunity to really explore what is it that you want to do, because anybody can build a business. Why just build a business for the sake of building a business when you can build a business, and a thriving business, doing what you love or aligning with your passion points? And so this is really, with everything that's going on right now, because I'm hearing people who had secure jobs during the first part of this quarantine, who now realize, oh, my job may not be secure for June. And so this is really an opportunity to say, okay, what are going to be my next steps? Because at some point we're going to all have to start thinking about, how do I reinvent what I consider success? And what is that new vision I want to have for myself?
Yeah, I love that. What are some more of your parting words? Where can we find you, and how do we get on your newsletter?
You can find me. My website's been the same for 15 years, vickyayala.com. And another reason why I advocate getting your name is because I met another Vicky Ayala who's in California who did similar work, but not really.
No way.
So, but she spelled it with an I. So I was just like, okay, let me not say that in case she watches this. But this was like 10 years ago.
Wow.
But that was my lesson. That was my teachable moment. Keep your name, get your name, because you want to make sure that even if you're not using it, you just want to make sure that you're locking it down so no one else can take it.
And before we head out, I want to mention the comment that Alexis just dropped in. She said, I lost my job in talent relations, events, and partnerships. I have an interest in design. I want to transition into graphic design and writing, but I'm not sure how to spin my transferable skills. I think I need to sit more with these questions in the anchor phase.
Yeah, that's pretty easy. Talent relations, events, partnerships, that's relationships. And so when you think of it in the sense of design, this is why I don't like using the word graphic design anymore. It's visual storytelling. When you're doing, partnerships and talent relations, you're still building those connections. Maybe that's the word, that you can lean into, is helping people create connections through visual storytelling.
I love that. It's all about finding that thread and how to tell that story so that people don't say those sound like two completely different industries.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, we always look at it as like, what's the common denominator?
Yeah, language is so powerful, says Alexis. I agree. And that vocabulary bank that you have, that you showed, is so fantastic, because sometimes we lack the words to be able to articulate exactly how we're feeling or what we do.
Yeah, and also you want to be careful when you're following other people in your industry. And this is another reason why I'm a big advocate for creating your own dictionary, is because when you're reading other people's newsletters and you're staying on top of your industry, you want to make sure you're not sounding like the others. And you want to make sure that what you're sharing and what you're creating it at least sounds authentic to you.
I love that. Authenticity and language is powerful. Well, that is it for our webinar. Vicky, thank you so much for sharing all of these incredible gems. You can find her, Vicky with a Y, Ayala, on LinkedIn, as well as her bankablemagik.com. And thank you all again for tuning into the Latinista on Demand here on Crowdcast. Have an awesome rest of the week. Thank you, Vicky.
Thank you.